I can't hear anybody. I will. It's. Just
So
bear with me.
hello everyone, I Snigdha Basu, project lead of the Disobedient Girls series at neostory.biz, welcome you to the final episodes of the talk series. The anthology titled Disobedient Girls is now available on Amazon. Please download, read, and share your thoughts with the odd sister resident contributors to the anthology that to discuss their writing with our project delegate and author Richa Mukherjee. Let me begin by introducing our project delegate and contributors who will be joining us today. Richa ma'am is an ex-journalist and advertising professional turned author, poet, and mentor. She writes for several online platforms and her books have been procured for screen adaptations. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
So next up
And
is
Snigdha, I
Ashvani.
must say thank you for the superb steering of this entire project. You've done a stellar job. So
Thank
thank you for that.
you. So next up is Ashvani Sachdev. He is an Indian Air Force veteran who, after an early release from the service, sidestepped to civil aviation and worked as Chief Operating Officer of an airline and CEO of an air charter company. He holds 4 master degrees, has traveled extensively, and wants to write fiction. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And finally, Rashmi Agrawal. Rashmi lives in India and sits by a big window to write, enjoying the timeless seasons. She has recently won the Strands Publisher Flash Fiction Contest for December month. Her words are available or forthcoming in Dollar Store Magazine, Inked in Grey, Gutslut Press, Active News, The Hive, and Women's Wear. Her short stories have found space in various anthologies. Currently, she is polishing her first manuscript, which is a psychological thriller. Welcome.
Thanks, Snigdha.
So, I'd like to begin the session by asking our project delegate about what your thoughts are and what was your first response to this project of Disobedient Girls.
Firstly, Snigdha, apologies. If everybody can just speak a little louder, there's something wrong with this gadget and I can't seem to find my headphones. So I'll try my level best. So please bear with me. I'm assuming you're asking me about the project and, the topic and my experience. So uh, I've always been impressed with the kind of topics Coral and you guys dig out because, they seem to stoke the right kind of fires always. As far as Disobedient Girls is concerned, I think it's versatile. It's an expansive topic. It's vast. It's open to myriad interpretations. And this is something I mentioned even in the first panel discussion that we had, with Hari and Kanchana, that to me, what I loved about Disobedient Girls is, to me personally, I don't think disobedience is always about belligerence and irreverence and in your face aggression. I think it can also come from a quiet place of certainty, you know. It's about women who want to live more, experience more, do more than is often apportioned to us. And, we're told very often how to be in every aspect of our lives. So it is a sense of non-conformity to being handed out the way we should live and the way we should be without an immense amount of guilt. Because let's be clear, we live with guilt every single day. So no matter how emancipated we feel, the guilt doesn't go anywhere. And it's a constant partner on this journey. So essentially, I'm also part of a lot of these writing forums and women's community. And a common feature that I've seen across is that there is this need. I don't want to dilute what they feel by saying rant, by using the word rant. But what tends to happen is when these kind of topics come up, these are the ones that make you cogitate, the ones that force you to think of your own experiences. There's this surge and there's this tide of women wanting to express, their own stories, what has happened to them. Sometimes it's about disconnecting and imagining how else you could have behaved in that situation, right? So a lot of it is about projection. It's about, moving away from your reality or things you actually might have done. And who are we kidding? I mean, in the paper this morning, I read about, how the Taliban is telling, women newscasters to cover their faces. And we can say that this is an exception, but let's admit this is not. Because in some form or the other, women are always being asked to cover up their faces, cover up their emotions, cover up everything, and just brush it under the carpet. But the beauty about this kind of topic is that it forces everybody on both sides of the spectrum to think. And I was delighted to see Ashvani's story as well, because I think it's a gender agnostic space. And it's, storytelling and literature is cathartic, and it is, it's all about compelling storytelling, and it could come from any side of the, bridge. So, and the more it's vetted by a comprehensive, community of people, even men, it's going to be that much more emphatic and that much more thought-provoking. So, yeah, by all I've said, you clearly know that I'm impressed by this topic, and it was very challenging and interesting. So, great.
Child disobedience.
Sorry, Snigdha, I didn't get you at all.
Can you tell us a little about the women from your books and how they channel their disobedience?
Okay, so you're asking me about disobedient women in my books. Okay, so very similar to, I think, this topic, which is about disobedient girls. I think, I've often been asked about humor. So to people who haven't read any of my work, I tend to write humorously. And I think that was somehow a choice I gravitated to by virtue of, I don't know, I've just been brought up in a manner where I have seen, in a kind of I guess, environment where I have seen a lot of wonderful as well as a lot of unpalatable things happening around me. So it was a way of processing, and also there was a constant amount of change in my life. So it was always a way of processing. I was moving around. So my dad's in the government service, and every 3-4 years we would move, and we've been all over the country. So it was a way of processing the change and everything that was happening around me. And on this journey, just like I was telling, Ashvani, he's been marinating in all these stories. I think I picked up a lot of, nuances, a certain way of reading people and a certain way of assimilating people's stories. And it was all sitting within me. When I started writing, there was no express intention of making these emphatic points and, about social order and patriarchy and this, that, and the other. But what tends to happen is, once you're writing from a place of honesty and you're enjoying what you're doing, you can easily dip into everything that's, that's within you. And that's what's happened to these ladies, these women that I have written about in my books. So whether it was I Didn't Expect to Be Expecting, which was about accidental pregnancy, it's a wonderful stage of life, which is exciting for so many people. Yet it is like a death knell for women when it comes to certain things. Career, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to go forward from here? So it was her challenging. So it was Tara in a very interesting and irreverent way challenging this norm that, I don't grow horns once I've had a child. Because I've had the privilege of creating a life, my life shouldn't be destroyed and I can go on with my life as well. In Kanpur Khufia Private Limited, there was an 85-year-old doyen of the household who spoke nothing, would spit most of the time, but even with her, her actions and her expressions, she was able to control the entire household. And these are women who are part of a very traditional setup. And I personally don't feel that our history and our roots and tradition, there's everything wrong with it. I'm not one of those people, because I think we can take our learnings and, the merits of what we have and then, amalgamate it with modern thinking and culture. So these are women who are very deeply in a I won't say patriarchal, but a very traditional household and a setup. Yet one of them decides to work in the, a detective agency with her husband. The other one, leads these Nari Morchas while making achars on the side. So it's not about what you do. It's about how you, find a way to live your life the way you want within the setup you're in. And Excess Baggage was very basically about the story of a mother and her daughter. And both of them have taken very unconventional decisions when it comes to their lives, their what they do, their partners. And, there's a lot of divorce that's happened in the family. So it's again about addressing the labels that society places on you. But either you can accept those labels and that'll essentially be you, submitting to anybody else's idea of how you should live your life. Or then you can, go ahead and carve your own path. And I'm thankful that all of these disobedient girls / women, have found a way and a voice through my books.
Thank you, ma'am. Can you read an excerpt from your book for the audience, like to have an idea?
Um, I will tell you a very unfortunate thing, Snigdha. My in-laws were visiting. I had a lot of friends coming over. So I have unfortunately given away all my copies. And this is a problem for authors. They need to keep giving away copies. So I don't have anything handy at the moment. But what I'll do is once you're chatting with Rashmi and Ashvani, I'll try and get something online and read it out to you towards the end.
Can you suggest some areas tied to this theme that you think one can explore that maybe the anthology has not touched upon?
Sure. So honestly speaking, I have I have read only a certain number of entries. So I can't, state this in entirety. This is just basis what I have read so far. This might be a bit abstract, but these two thoughts that came to me when I was, thinking of the anthology. Disobedience somehow is always interpreted and brought down to external factors. Evil in-laws, or husband didn't let me, or society didn't let me. But I honestly think a lot of these battles start internally for women. And they are the first ones who are the deterrents to, positive action as far as they themselves are concerned. Because when it comes to taking decisions for yourself, oh, baad mein, it's all good, it'll happen. So I think the first barrier is essentially, this internal dialogue and this thing that I was talking about, women being apologetic all the time and stopping themselves. So I think it would have been interesting to explore that aspect of, before the battle is waged outside, there is an internal battle that, we all must deal with, which is the perennial pandemic that women face, the being apologetic and stopping ourselves from doing what we want. So it would have been interesting to read, something from that mindset. And something else that occurred to me is that uh, whatever I read was essentially, historical or factual or creative, and it was poetic. It would have been interesting to read perspectives of women who are in their, elderly women who are not in a place of taking decision, the kind of decision making that all of us have the privilege of, making those decisions in this day and age. So what does a person who is in the silver years of their lives look back and think about a topic such as disobedience, right? What is it that she in her small way was able to achieve or not achieve through her life? Is it something that is an alien concept to them? So I thought even that end of the spectrum, it would have been interesting to read a few perspectives from there. So this is just top of my head, but abstract.
Thank you, ma'am. We will now be discussing the works of the contributors. First up is Ashvani sir. Can you tell us a little about Abakka from your short story and what inspired to write about her?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as a child, I heard of Rani Lakshmi Bai, and then a little later about Begum Hazrat Mahal. And then in Delhi, you see all these roads named after Aruna Asaf Ali, Sarojini Naidu, all the freedom fighters. But I had never heard the name Abakka till about a few months ago. I'd never heard of her name. And when I heard the name, I was intrigued by the fact that I didn't know about her earlier. And I was trying to find out how come I didn't know about it earlier. And then I did some digging and I found that probably because she was a queen in Tulu Nadu, where the Tulu is a language which is spoken by very few, in proportion, very few people in India. And the literature there is it's almost non-existent. There is some literature, but before the 16th and 17th century, whatever was written was on palm leaves, and a lot of it just vanished. It got destroyed. There's nothing. So the local stories tell us about a Queen Abaca who fought against the Portuguese. The Portuguese, as you know, came into India in 1498. And this Abaca fought them from 1550 to 1570. And there are some local stories available about it. And then there is a very famous Italian traveler called Pietro del Valle, who has, he traveled all over the world. He came to India also. Then he wrote about what he saw here. And all those letters are available. They have been printed into a book. And in 1623, he wrote a letter from Mangalore where he described meeting a queen called Abak Devi Chiatru. So Abag appears to be a mutilation of Abaka, and Chiatru again appears to be a mutilation of Chauta, which was the clan name or the dynasty name of this dynasty, which was a Jain Bantu dynasty in Tulunadu. So now we have one Abaka in 1550 to 1570 as per accounts, and another one in 1623 whom this guy met physically. So, and if you, there is an Indrajal comics on Abaka, which series on Abaka, which says that one Abaka was the mother of the other Abaka. So these two Abakas which I am talking about could not be mother and daughter because of the time difference. But to cut the long story short, I found some other sources which talk of four Abakas. So I'm not sure whether Abaka was a title or whether it was a proper name. And, like I think Khalid Hosseini, you said, writing fiction is the act of weaving a series of lies to arrive at a greater truth. So, as of now, my quest for Abaka or Abakas, more than one, is still work in progress, and I'm working towards that greater truth. And someday I'll have a bigger version of this story.
Thank you, sir. Like for the audience, would you like to read an excerpt from your short story?
Sure. So, if you permit me 3 minutes, I will read the beginning and the end. So that will
Go
give
ahead.
a sort of the whole story. In fact, King Tirumala Raya III, his forehead furrowed with concern over the danger that lurked over his Ullal, a small kingdom on the western coast of the Indian peninsula, walked into his courtroom for an emergency meeting of his counselors. The sight that greeted him brought a beaming smile to his countenance despite his preoccupation. Abaka had hoisted herself up on his throne and planted herself on it with her feet astride, a small flag of Ullal held high in her right hand, her left palm resting on her waist. The moment he entered, she cried out shrilly, "Long live Ullal!" He looked at his 5-year-old niece, full of vigor, her chest thrust out and her head held high. "Abaka, how many times have I told you not to sit on my throne?" With a twinkle in her eyes, Abaka responded, "But I was not sitting, I was standing on it." He smiled at her and made a mock lunge at her. As Abaka pirouetted to move out of his reach, she slipped and toppled over. Before the king could do anything to break her fall, she lay sprawled on the floor. Amazingly, her hand still held the flag high, and her gaze piercingly engaged the king's, even as she yelled out, "Long live Ullal!"
Thank you.
So years later, he would tell Abaka that it was in that moment that he decided that she would rule Ullal after him. If you give me another minute, I will read the ending. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. It was only a matter of time until the Portuguese discerned in Ullal's conduct a pattern of total defiance and disobedience. A large force under the command of Admiral Dom Alvaro de Silveira arrived at Ullal to teach her a lesson and to exact tribute. But Abaka's well-motivated force repulsed the attack successfully. In a subsequent attack, the Portuguese managed to capture Ullal, but Abaka escaped and took refuge in a mosque. She mounted a counterattack that same night, and killed General Pexeto, the force's leader, compelling the force to retreat and withdraw from Ullal. The next attack was much more formidable, but Abaka fought valiantly at the head of her forces, right until a heroic death. Critically injured, her horse badly hobbled, she was surrounded by Portuguese soldiers, but the thought of surrender was far from her mind. She wielded her sword to make way towards a flag of Ullal on a post near her and reached out for it. As several spears impaled her and she fell from her horse, she lifted the flag high and looked up, shouting, "Long live Ullal."
That was a wonderful narration, sir. A reminder for the audience that Ashwani Sachdev's short story is a part of the anthology Disobedient Girls. You can download it from Amazon. So, to Richa ma'am, what's your review of Ashwani sir's short story?
Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Honestly, I don't want to over intellectualize this. I think you've written a brilliant story. And I think by writing the story, you brought yourself, in the same vicinity or in the neighborhood of, I say, I don't want to say league because every storyteller is unique in their own way. But, I was talking about Chitra B. Devakarni and Sai Swarupa, and why should we go so far? Koral Das Gupta. And these are women who have dug into history. Sorry. Who've dug into history and mythology and brought forth stories of women who have created an indelible impact in every which way. Yet they've been relegated to certain very small chapters of history here and there and forgotten because or mythology, because all these stories are reserved for men of valor. And it's very interesting because my dad has this I think is this wonderful library with about some 2,000-3,000 books, and there was a stack. He used to keep on buying encyclopedias and stacks of books. So when we'd gone to meet him the other day, I brought about a 16-volume set of books for my daughter. It was about very important character, people from who made who've created an impact in our country, change makers, change agents, people who made decisions, epoch-making decisions for our country. 16 volumes, not a single one on women. There was not a single woman in there. And there was just one, always this tokenism of, even though that's obviously, she did a great job, but, Jhansi Ki Rani, that's the only token, female name you hear. So I'm extremely delighted that you have chosen this story. And I must say, when I started researching, your story got me curious enough to start doing my own research. And because I was ashamed to, to realize that I didn't know about this lady. And I started researching. And like you said, fiction is all about lies reaching the ultimate truth, right? So what you were saying is true, because I read about some 8 to 10 different versions of her death, the retelling. Sometimes her husband was involved, sometimes he wasn't. So it doesn't matter. What does matter is that you chose to take this hybrid space of fiction, non-fiction, and you immersed your story in it. And the fact that you chose to tell the story, I was really impressed with the research, the fact finding, the narration. So I don't want to sit in a place of judgment and tell you what was good or bad, because it came from your lens, and that is the storyteller's lens is more important. But purely from a reader's point of view, from what it would have made it a little more evocative for me in terms of a storytelling, way, method, is if I knew a little more about Abaka while she was growing up. Something about her mental machinations, the conundrums. What is it that, led her to be how she was? Because some of those influences, or if there was a little more using devices of God knows, maybe I guess flashbacks, or some incidents from the past, or however it is you could have chosen to do it. Maybe if I knew a little more about her, as from an emotional investing point of view, I would have liked to know a little more about her, and to be more invested in that character. Otherwise, it was wonderful, and I honestly have nothing to add. And I guess the success in your story is evident in the fact that I went about researching this character. So that's how invested you got me in the story. So it was wonderful.
Thank you for your kind words, Richa. I just wanted to give one weak defense of why that narrative arc, which I would have liked to be a full horizon to horizon kind of a rainbow, ended up like this. It was because of the limit on the words. Otherwise, I would have loved
Sure.
to do that. Yes.
Sure, sure. Not at all. I understand that it's a difficult space and there's always constraints. But yeah, so that's just about the only feedback. And I'm sure had you had more of a space, you would have done a better job. But that's the whole point. The challenge is always, there are always challenges and constraints, and then we can try and find a way out of it. So I'm sure you'll take it on board, and I'm looking forward to read a whole series of wonderful women characters from you, from our history.
Thank you, Richa. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So now over to Miss Rashmi. Can you tell us a little about your short story and what's the inspiration behind it?
So this short story is about a woman who is disobedient to her partner, like according to the theme. I was reading through some of the instances, like why divorces happen outside India, and there was one instance where a man divorced his wife because she didn't agree for his polygamous nature. He suggested that he has lost interest and they both should find various partners, and he was okay to have multiple relationships and they should be very open about it, like kind of an open marriage. So that ticked, and that was the base of their divorce. That wife said, I wouldn't agree with that, and then he said, I'll divorce you. So I just thought that what if we have a similar situation in India? But then I realized this is not related to India or a region or a country. This can happen anywhere in the world. This is the reason I do not have any names in the story. Everywhere, if you read the story, there is only he or she. I didn't name them because I didn't want to I didn't want to box them in a category, a country, a region, religion, or ethnicity, because such things might happen anywhere in the world. But this is a very modern society, or these two people are very modern in nature, because uh, they're also live-in partners, they're not married. And this is the uh, it's like when the men suggest that let's try something new in our relationship, let's we have kind of an open relationship. Then she is like, despite being a very modern woman who agrees to live in, she says that no, I don't accept that, I don't want to go into that kind of relationship. So this is the crux of the story. And there is a little bit of, I wouldn't say humor, but there is a lightheartedness in the kind of revenge she takes in the end, because the man is very fussy about being well organized. Dresses should be very proper, clean, spick and span home. So she takes her revenge in a very different way. So this is the crux of the story. This is how I got the idea.
Thank you, Miss Rashmi. Would you like to read an excerpt from your short story to the audience?
Yeah, sure. This is from the middle of the story, where the man blames her for something, and then the excerpt ends where she says that I don't want to stay with you. Don't suggest me a temporary solution. You should believe in my plan, he said. When she rejects his pleas, he jerked her away and screamed, you've stopped listening to me. And when did I ever listen to any of the irrational man? She thought. Though she could slap a befitting answer, she chose to remain mum. What is your problem? You drink alcohol like an addict. You wear dresses that make man go salivating, and you have kissed so many. Then why? I drink because I like it, just like you do, she said. I kissed men only when I was dating them. And objecting on my dressing style is just irrelevant. Oh, so pious. Do you even remember how many men you have slept with? I'm always monogamous. I never cheated on you or anyone. For God's sake, what has happened to you? I'm bored now. Seriously, look closely. Are you happy? He asked. I was until today. And don't you love me? I severed all the ties with my parents to be with you. I love you, damn it. Look from my perspective, and you will know You aren't talking sane, her voice softened. Now, don't put yourself on a pedestal. You have lost your sheen. I want someone who excites me, who can surge my adrenaline, someone fearless and fairy. I thought I was the fairest tigress in your life. He had himself admitted how he loved adventures with her. Their outings always gave him the kick he craved for. Not anymore. You don't excite my body or mind. His voice was seething. So be it. I'm not hiking your salacious adventure trail this time. He dressed up, picked his car keys, and slammed the door of the bedroom. She tucked herself inside the quilt with a bottle of Marlowe and thought, what is wrong with the rationality of people who swing by my life? Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Rashmi. A reminder that Rashmi's short story is a part of the anthology Disobedient Girls. It can be downloaded from Amazon. Now, over to Richa ma'am. What's your review of Rashmi's short story?
Rashmi, I really enjoyed reading your story, and I think you've done something very smart. Picking the
Thank
context
you.
and the backdrop of a story is very crucial to what you're trying to, to the entire point or message that you're trying to deliver with your story, or even the narration style. And the fact that she's at a stage in her life where she's very vulnerable. These are those kind of situations where, you find out you're pregnant, or you find out, that you're out of a job, and you suddenly think that, I'm going to be dependent on people. What am I going to do? So so it's a very interesting context to pick, because it makes a point that instead of being an abla nari, I think there's always another option, and you've done it with a sense of humor. So I think the context was very interesting. One thing I would just like to mention is, there's something about the element of surprise. And this is something I have to keep on telling and reminding myself, because I write humorous thrillers as well. Sometimes, if that surprise has a bit of there's a build up to that final surprise in the end. So the surprise I'm referring to here is the fact that that sudden escalation happens and he leaves her in the end. So I found that a little, though most emotional decisions are irrational in a sense, and it's very reactive and in the moment. I just thought maybe I found it a little odd that right in the beginning, the kind of relationship I understood both of them to have wouldn't, and a 3-year-old relationship wouldn't suddenly escalate to a point where he just leaves. So I just thought maybe if there was some bit in the initial bit, which helps us understand the kind of person he is, or the fact that he's really temperamental and this, that, and the other, that would have helped lay a little bit of the groundwork for what was to come. Because I just thought it was just odd that right in the end he just suddenly explodes, and he doesn't even explode, he just walks off. So the fact that what was it leading up to this, that he was mentally prepared to even do this, towards the end. Otherwise, it
Right.
was very interesting, and especially the end. I personally wanted something more vicious to happen to him, but you chose to treat it with sense of humor, and I think that was nice. So overall, a very interesting story, and
Thank
it
you,
gets a
Richa.
message across in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and I have noted down your suggestion in my mind. So this is more like related to the character. So it's a very
Yes.
nice idea. Thank you.
So we now move on to questions from our contributors. Ms. Rashmi and Ashvani sir, since this is your reward, you're now encouraged to ask questions you may have for Rachana. Anyone may go first. Ashwani sir, would you
Can you
like
hear
to?
me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so this whether writing is an art or a craft is a long-standing question, and whenever I read anything about it, it gives some new idea to me. So basically, as I understand, art is something which relies on artistic merit, which is probably born with that artist, and craft is something which you learn the skills, the techniques, etc. So uh, I think it was Picasso who said, learn the rules like a pro so that you can break them like an artist. So my question to Richa is writing an art or a craft? Can it be learned? And if so, then is it the universities, workshops, and things like that, which are going to teach you how to write better? Or is there some other approach to it? Just like reading others' books?
So I think it was Ernest Hemingway who said that all you need to do to be a writer is, make yourself sit at a typewriter and bleed, because when you'll come across a lot of these reels and a lot of writers making light of the fact and lamenting the fact that it's so hard and it's insanity. But can I tell you that as far as writing for me is concerned, Ashvani, I have found it to be a very organic pursuit. So your question was about whether it's an art or whether it can be honed and crafted. I think it's an amalgamation of both. If there is raw material present within you, you have to have the wisdom to understand what is a hobby and what is something that has to be driven with a purpose strong enough to take it the whole mile. So there are a lot of pursuits. For example, I learn Kathak because I come from this very musically inclined and family who were into the arts, and there are painters, and I love to. I mean, I can't paint like Coral, and I'm sure you guys have all these interesting hobbies. So I would love to paint. I would love to do Kathak. I would love to do a whole bunch of things. But I have realized by virtue of experience and the fact that I've been writing from a very long time, not long format, but poetry, something within me, helped me arrive at, this conclusion that there you go. Murphy's law will always appear with internet connections and somebody at the door. If you can just excuse me for 1 second. Sorry, how ironical, it was somebody from the internet company when it's not working. Yeah, so I think it's something that is innate, and it's something you have to identify on your own, how much it interests you and how far you want to take it. Having said that, you must invest in a certain amount of preparation as well. Here I'm talking about language. Here I'm talking about the courses. I personally don't have more than 2 books on writing, and I have attended 1 or 2 master classes here and there. What I have realized, Ashvani, is that I enjoy people talking about life and the process of writing and their own experiences. It's not about the to-do and hows and this, that, and the other. The basic language is a conduit. Without good language, I will not be able to express exactly what I need to. So that is an absolute, of course, I can't shortchange that process. But other than that, I've realized that writing is a very individual process for everyone. There are people, so in the writing community, there's always this debate of are you a plotter or are you a pantser? Plotters are the ones who go into absolute details. They'll have these small chits and index cards, and it's really, really detailed. And on the other hand, pantsers are supposed to be the people who are intuitive as writers, and they can do that. I have realized that every single book of mine has been a sort of classroom for me. So, every year, because not more than 1 book can come out every year, I've realized that while I can write intuitively, and that is the way I like to write best, there is a certain, amount of merit in structure and in preparation, because that is the framework within which you are going to write. And there's a certain amount of discipline that is required. So I work at a confluence of, being intuitive as well as giving myself that structure and writing that structure. And it is important even in terms of discipline when it comes to marketing your work. Because gone are those days when writing was this romantic notion where with a jhola you can sit in the corner, write something, hand it over to somebody and say, buddy, here, market it for me and make everybody love it. So we know that it's really exacting. So it's not as romantic as the purists would like, at least enjoyed it at that point in time, maybe a few decades ago. But I must say, while it is maddening, it is wonderful, and I would have it no other way. And along the way, I have identified a couple of courses for me. for myself, not because I want to understand the hows and whys of writing. It's because I want to understand how people have experienced books, which is why I love attending lit fests. Is because I love listening to people. Essentially, it comes from a place of experience and knowledge, which is rooted in real life as opposed to books. So these are some sort of books I don't always, immerse myself in too much. And I try to learn from experience, being a sponge. And while writing, I give myself a little bit of structure. So it was a little meandering response, but I hope you got the gist of it.
Yes, I think I'm a little less confused now. Thank you.
Ms. Rashmi, do you have any questions for Richa?
Oh, I had a lot of them, but I'll just ask what Richard does the best. Many of your books have humor as a theme. So where do you find your motivation to infuse comedy and light-hearted fun? Because when I was writing this story, the previous structure that I had in my mind was very. I mean, the end was a somber one. It was not like it didn't have a light-hearted comic note over there. But then I said that no, let's do something different because this lady needs a little bit of fun in her life. So I tried to infuse a bit of humor over there, which was very difficult for me. But then you do it very nicely in your books, like in Kanpur Khufia, and then not expecting the expect that book about the unexpected pregnancy. So how do you do that? I mean, like if you go to TV or shows, comedy shows, stand up shows, they have the same one liners, but it's very difficult to bring in humor in the books, in the written text.
Absolutely. So, Rashmi, I keep saying that humor is omnipresent, yet it's nobody's child, because you don't. There isn't a particular focus on humorists or satirists, but at the end of the day, any kind of writing across genres, if you don't infuse a little bit of levity and humor, they become very tedious to read. Because on a daily basis, we experience myriad emotions, and humor is just a part of it. So I think I draw inspiration from the comedy of life and the comedy of manner. I've been heavily influenced by P.G. Woodhouse, Ruth Rendell, Howard Jacobson. These are the kind of people who would make something so banal happening around you seem so humorous. It just makes life palatable, it makes life interesting, and there are so many interesting characters around us. Everybody is a character in every sense. If you can laugh at yourself, if you can laugh at pretty much everything happening around you, I think that is where mostly I have this humorous lens on the world. There's always like a parallel track. I think it's innate. It was not something I worked on. I'm part of a large family, and there's a lot of masaledar storytelling, and we've done through our lives, sitting with our chacha chachis, mama mamis, retelling stories from God knows when. So I think it's something that's innate, and yeah, it's. I think the comedy of life is enough fodder. And like you said, there are times in my life where people expect you to always be ready with a punchline when you write humorously. But it's not about that. It's about the humor in between the lines without being too obvious and also not being offensive. So it's about, walking that middle path. And incidentally, two of the books that I wrote, especially the climaxes, both happened at, times in my life where I lost somebody very close to me. And then there was the pandemic happening. So I didn't have much to laugh about. But when you somehow, I guess, divorce yourself from everything else that is happening around you and channelize the inner you, that's when you can write. So the fodder is all around. It just needs to be channelized. I need to put my humorous lens on to just look at the world around me.
Thank you, Richard.
So, any more questions for Richa ma'am?
Can I ask one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, whenever most of the books and articles about fiction tell you that a conflict is the spine of the story. I mean, without a conflict, you can't have a story. So my fantasy is to write a story in which there is no conflict. I mean, I always keep thinking, why can't we have a story where two people meet, they love each other, they enjoy things, and you are describing what's happening to them, what they are going through, and end the story on a happy note? Why can't we do that? But everything I have read about fiction says, no, you must have a conflict, and you must have a conflict right in the beginning, otherwise it's not a story. So what are your views on that?
I don't entirely agree about the positioning of the conflict. It does not necessarily have to be the starting point. But what I do admit it, I'll give you an example that happened with me. I didn't expect to be expecting was, to the horror of my publishers, 175,000 word manuscript when I submitted it. And it was a story about, love, romance, pregnancy, and, how she overcomes all the hurdles that she's coming across. But my publisher came back to me and said, firstly, this is humongous and you'll have to chop it down to a quarter of its size. And in addition to that, where's the friction? So I asked her the same question. So she said, it's not about a central point of friction and then the resolution. It needs to be portions of frictions that you are navigating the story around. Otherwise, it's about me talking about the daily lives of two people, right? So I'll give you another example. The Blind Matriarch by Namita Gokhale. I just finished reading it a couple of days ago. It's essentially a story about a family that is stuck in a home during the pandemic. Is there a central conflict? No. It's an everyday story about this blind matriarch going about her day, and her grandson, conversations, chota family frictions here and there. So essentially, it's not about a central conflict, but the backdrop is the pandemic, which lends that that nature of conflict in the backdrop. So even if I were to speak about, say, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is an obvious conflict. Here is a psychological, thriller, one of the oldest psychological thrillers, where when people didn't even realize what a psychological thriller was, where he talks about the mental machinations of what goes to the minds of a nobody on the streets who suddenly turns to crime, and what it does to them. So there is a central conflict there where he goes about, kills someone. So that's the obvious thriller kind of conflict. But I have found that in contemporary fiction, in mythological fiction, and there's a whole lot of genres which don't necessarily have a conflict, a central conflict. Neither do they begin with it, nor is the end the resolution. But there has to be some kind of fiction that you are writing around. It could be driven through the characters. It could be driven through a certain plot point in the story. But until and unless, that is the graph that humans, there's a graph that is followed for even how heroes and heroines are written. There was a whole case study done on this, that everybody loves this sort of hero. I forgot the term for it. There was a huge case study that was done on it, and there were a lot of documentaries made on it, where everybody likes a very typical, stereotypical kind of hero. Because whether we like it or not, the kind of storytelling that we're used to, we like some friction, we like some resolution, we like a little bit of happiness. And now we've developed appetites for all kind of storytelling, but some kind of friction, not in a very obvious way or a typical way, is essential, I think. Makes for interesting storytelling.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If there are no more questions, I think this marks the end of our conversation. I'd like to thank Richa, ma'am, for the very insightful inputs. I personally got to learn a lot, and thank you for your time this evening.
Now, sorry for butting in, Snigdha. I finally found an excerpt online that I had posted with some magazine. So if you'd like me to read a small portion, I can.
Yes, ma'am.
Only if we have time and if I have your permission. So, like Ashvani, I will have to, I think this is about 2.5 minutes. I'll try to read it very quickly, or I'll end it off in the middle. So the context is that this mum and daughter are the daughter is trying to go off on a trip and the mum's refusing to let her go. So what is this trip you want to go on and why? The mere construct of that question is offensive. I'm 30, but you treat me like a child, mom. Great. You're young enough for me to manage your smelly socks and laundry, figure out your meals and run the house for you, but too old to have any say in your life. I would gladly do all those things. You asked me to move in with you, remember? So what? I don't mind that you're here, but you treat me with contempt. like Mutton did when she first came in. Mutton is the name of a dog, by the way. I write a lot of my characters are named on food. This isn't about Mutton, but it is. Like you, I think Mutton's basic nature is rage. I also think small dogs are generally ferocious. If she was a collie, she would be much nicer. Collie? Yes, you know the white friendly ones? You mean like Ramesh Kohli, uncle from the general store? No, no, the white fluffy ones with long hair and those long cone like faces. You mean collies? Yes, that's what I just said, collies. And Viksha felt a headache coming on. You're digressing. Let's come back to the trip. I would have told you it all happened very quickly. That's exactly what you said both times you wanted to get married, Anu. Can you circumscribe your mission statement to not constantly pummel your daughter for her mistakes? Circum what? Smita Punjabi scrunched up her nose in confusion. I'm not targeting you, Anu. I just feel partially responsible, like it's in your genes, or that I set the wrong example because I'm a divorcee. Tell me, did you by mistake think that divorce is some kind of family legacy to be carried on? Okay, this goes on. So that was just an excerpt. I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, we did. We got to end the session on a humorous note. Uh, so, Mr. Ashwani and Richa, Rashmi, ma'am, I hope you had an enriching time.
Yes.
Uh, reminder, a reminder that Tell Me Your Story is calling for submissions of essays, poetry, and short stories for TMYS Review September 2022, themed on food and drinks, of which I am a project assistant. To know more, please visit tellmeyourstory.biz. Till then, stay well, safe, and a very good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Richa.
much.